Am I the a-hole for opening my husband's safe with a crowbar to get money for an emergency? I, female 31, am a stay-at-home mom with 2 kids. My husband dedicates most of his salary towards the kids and household, but has a safe that he puts money in on a monthly basis. I didn't make a fuss over it, because he said that he saved money for an emergency. I asked for the password countless of times, but he refused to give it to me and said that in case of an emergency, all I needed to do was inform him. He went on a 2-day business trip. Our son got sick and I had to take him to the hospital. The problem is, he needed medication but I didn't have any money except what was in the safe. I called my husband but he didn't respond. I texted him explaining the situation but he refused to cut his trip short and come home. I asked how I was supposed to get money for medication, and he suggested I either A, wait for him till he gets home, or B, borrow money from the neighbors. I just had it. I hung up and went to the garage to grab a crowbar, then took it to the safe and opened it. I took the money I needed, which was about $60, and went to the pharmacy store to get the medication. My husband came home a bit earlier, and when he saw what I'd done to the safe, he flipped out and started freaking out at me. I said I had no choice, and that all his suggestions were unreasonable and illogical for me to even consider. He yelled, saying I breached his trust and his boundaries, and should have never touched the safe, much less used the crowbar on it. We had a big argument, and he kept saying that I had no respect for him, his income, and instructions. Then he completely refused to speak to me and is threatening to move the safe since he no longer trusts me around it. Was I in the wrong for the steps I took? Should I have tried another alternative? Edit. I didn't have any credit cards because he's the one that normally has them since they're in his name, and I don't have a bank account to be able to own a credit card. Now for the top comments. This is financial abuse, and it's absolutely insane. Go to the neighbors and borrow money? Seriously? If my neighbor came to me and asked to borrow money because her husband left on a 2-day business trip and left her with no money, I'd call Adult Protective Services. I'd ask if she needed help getting to a women's shelter with her kids. It's 2022. Never mind the fact that as the working parent, he should have set up an account for you, the caregiver, with a few $100s for care expenses at all times. But like $60 for an extremely sick child? We live in an age of instant transfers, and there's a huge big box of money in the home, and it says, borrow it from the neighbors? Not the whole times infinity. You and your children are victims of mistreatment. You need to get out, my dear. So much this. Get out. Run. If only it were so easy. That's why people financially mistreat spouses so that they can't leave. OP couldn't even get her hands on $60 for kids' medicine without taking drastic measures. How is she supposed to just leave the house? I would assume she's socially isolated, especially since she didn't have friends/family she could call for help either. And she might even be in a rural area, without access to services like a women's shelter. I'm not saying she shouldn't start planning and squirreling away what she can, but just saying run for the hills isn't exactly helpful in these scenarios. She should absolutely start hiding away money whenever she can, and make copies of all important documents as well. Frankly, her best bet would have been to clear out that safe entirely and run with it. But she definitely needs to start making a plan to become independent of her husband, because he's controlling and that is dangerous. Not the a-hole. You do realize that the fact that he cares more about money and this supposed breach of trust than your son's health is highly concerning, right? This behavior is not normal. The fact that he left you with no money and you have access to no money is financial abuse. Let him move the safe, all the way out of the house along with his sorry butt. Nah, don't let him move the safe. She should take the rest of the money in it and deposit it into a bank account in her name, then kick him out. She'll need the money to live on until the divorce is finalized. Next story. Am I the a-hole for leaving my sick wife to deal with 2 toddlers on her own? I'd like to give a little bit of background first. I'm male 36 and my wife, female 35, have a 3-year-old daughter. I have a long-standing issues with my wife's sister-in-law because I think that my wife constantly panders to her and caters to her every whim, often at the expense of me and my daughter. Recently, we had a huge fight about her saying something offensive to me in a public setting in defense of sister-in-law at our daughter's expense. And up until this point, she has tried to do better. Now, we've been both floored with flu for the past 10 days or so. Negative COVID tests. She seems to have it slightly worse than me. So I've been tagged in to do all chores, childcare, and cooking while she's tried to get as much rest as possible. This has now trickled into a week I booked off work on holiday, which doesn't bother me in itself because I'd rather make sure they were both okay. I am, however, starting to feel really run down myself now. I'm tired. I've had limited opportunity to rest and catch up on sleep, and I'm sore. Today my wife woke up at around 9:15 a.m. I'd been up since 6:30 with daughter and said she was feeling a bit better. I said that's great, and maybe she could hold the fort while I went for a nap. She said that what she was actually thinking was inviting sister-in-law's youngest around for a playdate to keep our daughter occupied. For reference, she's 3. This isn't an uncommon thing to happen. Sister-in-law often brings her kids to us, and for reasons I still don't understand, our daughter was never invited to spend an afternoon with them in their house. I said that I really wasn't feeling up to it today. My wife said that I wouldn't have to do anything to entertain them, to which I was skeptical about, but I agreed. So about 15 minutes after she arrives, I'm asked to get them drinks and snacks and then play games and occupy them. Now, I'm aware that I'd have needed to do this for my own daughter, but going from 1 to 2 toddlers is such a huge leap in terms of the demand on your time and energy. Add this to the fact that I was feeling lousy and it just wasn't a good mix. I'm off work this week, and on top of my illness, I didn't sign up for extra childcare duties. After about 2 hours, I told my wife that I was going up to my mom's house to get asleep. The whole way up, she was phoning and texting me, absolutely furious that I'd left her to deal with it. I'm literally lying in my mom's spare bed writing this now, but my brain is too wired to sleep. Am I the a-hole? I know it's horrible leaving her while she's sick to deal with 2 toddlers, but after so long holding the ball, I've reached my limit. Not the a-hole at all. You told her you needed rest, and she decided to have a guest over? You should have just gone to take a nap as soon as the other kid arrived. God, I wish I had done this, right as sister-in-law walked in. Why would she invite a toddler over when both of you are still sick? The toddler could pick up the flu at your house and bring it home with her. Exactly. And now, Opie, you are at your mom's house while ill? This whole thing is an absolute disaster. Have we forgotten the flu can also be dangerous? The whole thing is irrational. If children were going to be doing play dates, Opie's toddler should have gone to sister-in-law's, and then both Opie and the wife could rest. Not the a-hole. First of all, you are both sick. Why would your wife want to potentially give that to her niece? Secondly, when both parents are ill and in general is a team effort, you should have your fair share of rest. Otherwise, all that is gonna happen is one will get better whilst the other runs themselves down, physically and emotionally. Your wife invited her around, and your wife should look after her. Next story. Am I the a-hole for yelling at my wife after she woke me up to help with the kids? My wife, Sonia, is a stay-at-home mom to our 2 children, 7 male and 5 female. I really try to help with the kids when I get home. I know being a stay-at-home mom is pretty tiring, even though she has part-time off from school, but helping with homework, making food, and taking care of kids can be exhausting. So when I get home, I make dinner, wash the dishes, and stay with our children for a while so she can have her moment too. These weeks have been pretty exhausting. It is a very important month professionally because in November will be the delivery of a 6-month project that my team and I are idealizing. Last week was the final touches and review for the entire project. So I went to work at 8 a.m., got home at 5 p.m., took care of my kids until 9 p.m., and was actually working until 3 to 4 a.m. to maybe get 3 or 4 hours of sleep. I have trouble sleeping. So if I slept 12 hours in 5 days, it was a lot. I was exhausted. I wasn't even driving because I didn't trust my senses to drive. I couldn't vent to Sonia because she was stressed too as our children had a flu. I was dragged to the hospital by my coworkers after nearly passing out for only walking. The doctor demanded that I take a week's medical leave because I was already on the verge of a burnout. When I got home, I spoke to my wife and she seemed to be understanding. I asked her to give me a day off from everything as I would try to get as much sleep as possible that night to come back better. She said fine. I offered to also give her a day off because I know she was tired too. I went to sleep at 9 p.m. and woke up to Sonia nudging me to take the kids to school. I walked with them. I talked about what we talked about yesterday and she said, yeah, but that's your part of the morning and I have other morning plans. Yoga class, gym, and house cleaning. I asked her 3 times more to do this for me as I was still exhausted. 6:30 a.m. But she just said, you're still a father, tired or not. It could be tired or not, but I ended up losing my mind and screaming, I just need a few hours of sleep. Please respect what I asked of you yesterday and let me sleep. She was in shock and said, okay then. She took the kids and I slept until 4 p.m. There were several messages from her saying that I shouldn't have yelled at her for asking me to take responsibility as a parent and that it was toxic behavior of mine. Well, we haven't talked much more than necessary for 2 days. Am I the a-hole? Yes, I could take them, but as I said in the text, I have a lot of trouble sleeping. After getting up and taking them, it would take a good few hours to get back to sleep, even when exhausted. I answered in the comments and I'll put it as extra. 1. Our children stay from 7:15 a.m. until 1 p.m. at school. My wife picks them up from school and stays with them until 5 p.m. when I get home. 2. The things she does, gym and yoga, take up 2 hours a day. When she gets home, she cleans the house, sweeps, waters the plants, washes clothes, makes lunch, absolutely everything in the house. I don't think the division of tasks is so unfair because I'm not 100% the one who takes care of the kids at night. While I make dinner and wash the dishes, she stays with them and we also have family moments. My kids are in the spirit seeing Face, series and movie 8,000 times. I don't think it's that unfair because it's chaotic sometimes. And I know that being responsible for our kids all day is exhausting, so I offer the same to her later. I couldn't put all this in a post due to limit words. Now for the comments. Given the context, not day haul. A doctor literally ordered you to rest, and your wife agreed to help you. If roles were reversed and you took time off work to step in for your wife, you would be the a-hole for waking her up. She didn't respect your valid medical need to rest. Your doctor even ordered a week of medical leave to rest. If this isn't a recurring thing outside of this isolated incident, not the a-hole. I agree. Well, I'm just assuming here, Opie's wife didn't need to go to the gym or yoga if it was just for fun, and could have walked the kids to school since Opie's doctor literally ordered him to rest. It would have been a different story if the doctor had it otherwise. This right here. Also, it appears that the wife gets a 2-hour break every day for yoga/gym. When does Opie get his 2-hour per day break? Not the a-hole. As a rule, I tend to go with you're the a-hole or everyone sucks here when it comes to yelling at people. But while I'm still not a fan even in this situation, it came after trying to be reasonable 3 times. I also usually see the men on here with stay-at-home wives as a-holes because they think their wives should wait on them hand and foot. That's clearly not the case here. It sounds like she has unfair expectations of you. You were literally sick, and she wanted to do yoga. You may apologize to her for yelling, but you standing your ground was not toxic. A good loving wife wouldn't be trying to argue fairness when you're sick from exhaustion. She needs a wake-up call about her entitlement. So let me get this straight. You take the kids to school. They're in school until what, 3? She watches them for 2 hours, then you take over? And otherwise, she does the cooking and housework. Yeah, cooking and housework is a lot, but come on. That's not really a fair division of labor. Now for the last story. Am I the a-hole for refusing to let my husband drive my son to school with his step-siblings anymore? Context. My ex-husband and I have custody of our 11-year-old son. He's diabetic, and since his diagnosis is relatively new, we're still working on managing things for him so he could continue to live a normal life just like other kids. His stepdad is responsible for dropping him off/picking him up from school, since his step-siblings attend the same school. The issue began when my son started asking me or his bio-dad to take him to school instead of his stepdad. He said a reason for that is because his step-siblings open his lunchbox and take all the additional snacks that he needs in case he had a hypoglycemic episode. That's what we call low blood sugar. His step-siblings would take his lunchbox from him and take the snacks, and only leave him his sandwich and water. His stepdad thinks there's nothing wrong with sharing, although I explained to him about a millionth times how important his snacks are. He promised that he won't let his kids touch my son's lunchbox from now on, and I believed him. Then days ago, my son came home and told me his step-siblings took his snacks from his lunchbox again. I was enraged. I asked if his stepdad saw them. He said yes, and he scolded him when he refused to let them have the snacks. I lost it. I blew up at my husband and told him that my son won't be riding in his car again with his step-siblings after what they've done. And after he allowed it, I told him that my son's father will be driving him to and from school from now on. He lashed out at me saying that I was driving a wedge between the kids and teaching my son to grow up being selfish and self-centered and antisocial, and also making my son distant from him and getting him to favor his bio-dad. I refused to discuss it, and now he's acting all hurt and disrespected, saying it was not worth ruining the kids' relationship over some snacks. Edited? His argument is that I don't get his kids the same amount of snacks I get for my son. They go through their snacks in no time. In my defense, I said that the snacks are part of my son's diabetes management routine, and he, unlike his step-siblings, needs them anytime. And so I don't feel like I'm obligated or that I should buy step-siblings the same amount of snacks seeing that they can do without them for a while. Am I making sense here? My stepchildren's ages are 13 and 10. Unless your husband has some kind of rare cognitive impairment, that means he doesn't understand the meaning of medical condition. He's the one who's the a-hole here, not you. As a longtime Reddit fan, my first instinct is, of course, to suggest dumping him, but I'm trying to curb that instinct. Aw, come on, you know you want to. Maybe just this once. You know, for old time's sake? Just joking with you. But yeah, I agree, the husband is either a bully or an idiot that doesn't understand how dangerous this medical condition can be. Even if he doesn't understand the severity of the medical issues, he does understand that his sons are stealing the majority of his stepson's lunch. If he thought it was unfair his stepson got so many more snacks, he could easily pack snacks for his sons. He is definitely a bully rather than an idiot. Not the a-hole, but maybe it's time to have a conversation with your husband about possibly modifying the custody arrangement for your son, because he is neglecting the boy's very real medical needs in a way that can have very dire health consequences. Also, taking all of something is not sharing. Modify the custody arrangements? How about modifying the marriage